Why is the longevity gap between men and women growing? This question is something that I've thought about a lot because, generally speaking, women live longer than men. And I've always been taught that it's because men are dumber. Okay, so no offense, dudes, but we have a little more testosterone. We seem to take more risks. But actually, what I've learned is that's not the whole story. And so if you stick around in this video, what I'm going to show you are three really important keys as to why women are outliving men. And you dudes who are competitive, I'm going to show you ways that we can bridge that gap and actually extend our own lifespan and health span at the same time. So have you ever heard of broken heart syndrome? My mother had a heart attack almost a decade ago, and it frightened us all. And it was during a time of immense stress in her life. And we just assumed it was like a normal heart attack, but actually what it was called is the Takutsubo Syndrome. And it's your heart literally breaks because of stress. The sympathetic nervous system starts to dominate the heart, and then you don't get the proper formation of the blood moving through the heart. And then you have this cardiac event where you have a loss of oxygen to the tissues, and it creates enormous amount of chest pain. And it was something that I feel really bad that my mother had to experience that. You know, we all love our mothers and we don't like to see them suffer. And so when she went through this process, I started realizing that women, there's a lot more of emotional capacity that they have. And sometimes you ladies, you take on too much. And what we're learning with the autonomic nervous system is you have two sides to the equation. And this may be one of the revelations that can bridge that gap between the longevity of women versus longevity of men. So broken heart syndrome, it does impact men as well, but it seems to impact women more than it does men. Actually, women aren't the only ones that are afflicted by the broken heart syndrome or Takutsubo syndrome. Men are too, but women have about a 2.5 times greater propensity to have this condition over men. And I know you're like, well, what does this have to do with longevity, Regan? Well, we're going to get there. But here's the study that shows the gender differences in Takutsubo. And what researchers did, this was an article published in 2015 in the journal called PLOS One, and they found that women, generally speaking, they looked at 368 patients, all with Takutsubo, and 84 of these were men and 284 were females. And what they looked at is they found that there were no significant differences in the ballooning type. They also looked at the echocardiography and they looked at the ejection fraction of the heart. And what they found is that the men who actually had the Takutsubo had more complications downstream than women did. Women seemed to recover pretty much all the way, and that's what my experience has been with my own mother. But men, that was kind of a precursor for more cardiac complications to come. And so if you think about the number one killer in our country, in the United States and worldwide in all developed countries, it's heart disease. Now we're prescribing more anti-hypertension medications, more cholesterol medications than ever, but we still haven't solved this problem of heart disease. And so heart disease is that one of the core things that drives men to lead shorter lives than they realize and that they want to. So think of somebody in your life who's had a heart attack. And how many of you had a man come to mind? Maybe it was your grandfather, maybe it was your dad, maybe it was your uncle, maybe it was your brother. And it's pretty sad, but you realize that it's usually the men. But women do have complications, but the symptoms manifest differently. So this is one way that we can start bridging the gap. So men, we'll talk about some of the things you can do to protect your heart in just a minute. Okay, the second thing that you want to consider is women biologically have greater advantages for longevity than men do. And what drives this response is women's immune system. So in women, when you have more estrogen in your body, your immune system leads more towards chronic disease instead of acute disease. Men have fewer incidences of having autoimmune diseases or chronic disease than women, but we have the acute diseases that can kill us. So fellas, it's not that the odds are stacked against us in longevity, it's just that we need to consider modulating our immune response and being very aware of these acute responders. And men tend to put their health to the side. We can ignore it. We can compartmentalize a little better than women can. And so we don't take it seriously when we get sick. And so one of the things you can do is actually start looking at your immune system through a whole new light. Now, there's an article that was published by Forbes magazine, and here's some of the interesting things that they found. They found that women generally have stronger immune responses. They also have more of an anti-inflammatory response. In aging, there's a condition called inflammaging, and women don't seem to harbor as much inflammation as men do. You know, one of the interesting things that we found on cold exposure is women have a greater sensitivity to cold than men do. Just the way that the dermal layer is built is women tend to have a little more fat on the surface of their body. And then the neurological system has a little more greater response to cold, giving them that signal to get out of the cold. It's dangerous. Us dudes, we get in there and we try to have competitions with each other. Not that I've ever done this. And then pretty much you get out of this 20-minute cold plunge and you have hypothermia. You know, you can't handle your bowels or urine. I used to have these competitions with my boys and we started getting like too long in the cold. And so we realized like, it's probably not good for us. But women have a little more sensitivity. The other two things the article revealed is women have more of these slow twitch muscle fibers. And so metabolically, they have a little bit slower of a burn, which means if you think an engine where you've got this ability to really put a lot of gas into the engine and take off and accelerate quickly, that would be your fast twitch muscle fibers. So men have more fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, I know women, there's some crazy fast women, insanely athletic. And so we have both of these. But generally speaking, women have more of these slow twitch muscle fibers, which changes their metabolic processing. And then the final thing that this article revealed is women have better utilization of fat as an energy source. Now, women, generally speaking, have more body fat proportionally than men do. And it's actually really important because if your body fat gets in like the teens, like the low teens, your fertility rates start to drop. Men, we get into the low teens, and that's actually a very efficient way for us to live. If we get in the single digits, however, I've noticed when I've been there, I don't have the same energy. I don't sleep as well. My brain starts hallucinating a little more because I lose sleep. But you look great, but it's not always ideal for your long-term health. Whereas women, one of the reasons they can outlive us is because they do seem to have a little more fat, which can be protective and it can be an energy resource. And so if you can capitalize on that, and you ladies, if you can access that energy reserve, you'll do so great. And I'll share with you some solutions coming up here. So the third thing, and I think this is probably the most important, there's a study that was published by Harvard Medical Journal, and what they found is that when people had social loneliness, so they didn't have very good social health, they lived 7 years shorter. Now, women tend to have more socialness. They have more friends. They experience greater pleasure in being in groups. And men, we seem to isolate ourselves, you know, the Sigma man or the Alpha man. Like you look at some of the movies, even like John Wick. I mean, I love Keanu Reeves. He's like one of my favorite actors. And you see what kind of behavior he has in those movies, and he's a loner. A lot of the, you know, you think of the action films, and some of the best actors that I connect with are the ones that are these Sigma males. You know, they are doing things their own way. Like Jake Reeker. I believe that's his name. But, you know, we watched that whole thing and he was just like deadpan. He was flat. Whereas women create more social networks. They have more connection. They really value relationships. And that's one of the biggest predictors for longevity. And so how can we accomplish this goal, men, of living the same? At least let's bridge that gap and live at least as long as our ladies. And I mean, I love my wife. I love my kids. My daughter's amazing. And without women, it would be kind of a funny world. I mean, I'm in a lot of groups and it's just men and we have such a great time. But when a woman comes in, it just balances out the energy. Even in businesses, they're finding that the businesses that do the best for the long run are the ones that have female leaders at the helm. Consider this as, many of you are entrepreneurs. So the first thing for the heart, what can you do? Well, number one is VO2 max training. You want to push yourself really hard. So this morning I went on this great mountain bike ride. I climbed 1,200 feet. I went about 10 miles and just had a great time. And my heart just gets things moving because a lot of the emotions I don't express very well. I've learned to compartmentalize for better or for worse. And so just by moving the blood in my body, it creates a nice opening for oxytocin, nitric oxide. The second thing you can do is if you're getting about 90 minutes of that zone 2 to zone 3, I'd rather have you closer to zone 3, 90 minutes a week is minimum. Second thing is thymosin beta-4 and BPC 157. Now these peptides are dramatic in their ability to produce nitric oxide and in the ability to repair your blood vessels. And so if you want to protect your heart against complications in the future or cardiovascular disease, these peptides have a great capacity to do this. Thymosin beta-4 clinically has been shown to activate stem cells so that you can heal any kind of damage in the capillaries. Okay, the second thing, what about the metabolic function of women? They utilize energy from fat better than men do. They also have this response in their immune system that doesn't trigger these acute diseases that can kill us. Well, two things that you can do. Number one is when it comes to accessing fat as an energy source, one of my favorite peptides is called 5-amino-1-MQ. 5-amino-1-MQ was discovered out of the University of San Antonio, Texas, and they were looking at this pathway called NNMT. And they found that if you inhibited this pathway or turned that pathway off, then the body wouldn't store fat as energy. It would actually use fat as an energy source. I just started my cycle yesterday. I've done this peptide cycle. I do it about 3 or 4 times a year. And it just turns on your body's own production of NAD. And NAD is the fuel for your cells and your mitochondria. So that helps fix that metabolic demand. And there's other peptides you can use as well. But consider 5-amino-1-MQ. The other thing for the immune balance, there's a peptide called thymosin alpha-1. And it's been studied for 30 years. What they find is it regulates that Th1 and Th2 and Th17 response. So even you ladies, if you have issues with autoimmunity or if you have any kind of chronic disease, just by regulating that, it helps you, but it's also something that us men can do. And men, make sure you're getting your blood work done and look at the white blood cells. Be very vigilant of keeping them healthy. Look at your monocytes, look at your eosinophils. These are going to be really important for both sexes. Now, women, I'm not saying like, all right, dudes, let's get up there. I would rather have you ladies living a really long time too. And so I don't mind if we're always chasing you. But I can tell you with all the advancements coming in medicine, I've never seen anything like it. And the biggest predictor of longevity, in my opinion, is relationships, which brings us to the third and final point, which is how can men start to bridge that gap and create more relationship capital, as my friend Gunderson says. Well, my wife's been out of town the last week. She's on this great Alaskan cruise with one of her friends, and it gave me a chance to really start fostering my relationships. As I was doing research on this topic, I went to a friend's house for dinner. I said, hey, I'll bring the dogs. Our dogs can hang out. And we just had a phenomenal conversation. And Garrett, if you see this, thank you so much for the fun evening and all the fun times. Garrett and I are bringing our sons and our families to the Playboy Cardi concert in Vegas. I don't really know his music, but I do like a little bit of rap in my life. The Weeknd will be playing as well. So, we're putting these social activities, we're embedding those into our life. And Garrett and I have a really close relationship. The next evening, I spent time on the phone with my good friend, Dr. Dan Kellums. And if you watch any of my Go Wellness content, you'll see that content with Dr. Dan and I. We just have this phenomenal, close-knit relationship. And what I learned is just by having those moments, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it was actually, I slept better. If you look at my deep sleep scores, I got greater levels of deep sleep, greater levels of REM. And it made such a difference just by making friends. So dudes, if you need a friend, just direct message me in the notes here, or you'll see me on Instagram. I'd love to hang out. I do events all the time so I can get to know more people, because I believe that friendships are the thing that will lead us into the future in a much greater way. Women, I love hanging out with you too, but men, we do need to be a little more intentional about it. So those 3 things will help change your life forever. And if you're interested in this and you say, hey, I really want to look under the hood, I want to make sure there's no threats that would take me out early, go to agelessfuture.com, click the button that says Health Span Assessment, and then you'll have a complimentary consultation with one of my health span experts, and then they will get your blood work ran. The blood work is your core metrics that we need in order to build the protocol that will help you create your own ageless future. And I'll see you there. I'm Regan Archibald. Appreciate you watching.